All right, who thinks size matters?
Yes, it does.
Why is she always listening when I ask that question? So some people do think bigger is better, and it seems Mackie thinks that as well. This is the review of the Mackie DLZ Creator, or as I have nicknamed it, Chungus. I'll be doing a full and extensive comparison between this and the Rodecaster Pro II later this week, so get subscribed so you don't miss that. But since the Rodecaster lineup has gotten the favor of no comparisons with their reviews, I thought I would offer this to Mackie as well here. So let's take a look at the mixer your girlfriend told you not to worry about and find out why you should worry, at least a little. Again, the first word that comes to mind is big. Now, Mackie's known for their build quality in creating little tanks with faders. And while this thing is plastic for the shell, it doesn't really feel cheap, much like the Rodecaster Pro II. That said, while the Rode counterpart can boast a bit of mobility with their units, this thing's probably not going anywhere. It's going to stay planted on your desk or workstation. There's nothing about Chungus here that makes me think this is mobile. The inputs, though, do feel nice and stable. No worries there. The buttons, pads, and faders also feel great, with nothing feeling cheap or out of place. I do have to worry about one thing, though. I got this straight from Mackie, and the 4-channel faders are all canted to the left. Now, I have no idea if this is intentional, though when I look at all the pictures online, I don't see any other units with this unusual feature. Now, it does not impact the use of the unit, so it may very well be an intentional thing too. Feels fine. I stopped noticing it almost right away. But let me know down below if you got something similar or if I'm just going crazy here. Anyhow, the 10-inch screen is almost an embarrassment of riches at this point. Similar size, if not bigger, than an iPad mini. It is very responsive and quite nice to use, and we'll cover that a bit more in depth in a bit. I also like the knobs on the side of the screen that are multi-use and can be employed differently depending on what screen you're on. As for the back of the unit, it's basically everything you'd expect from a podcast mixer these days, but with a few special extras. It's kind of like a podcast mixer was smooshed together with a regular Mackie mixer. And you don't need a computer to use this thing, much like all the other options, though this one allows you to record to a USB drive. Now, that gives it a bit more mobility for moving files around than an SD card, which, by the way, this thing also has. One thing I really love on here is a fader controller for your monitor outs, as well as a mute button for them if you don't want to lose your fader position. I really like that. There are a couple issues here, though. I didn't find the fader throws to be all uniform. Some were looser than others and seemed to have a click in their throw. They could all be smoother. Also, the trigger pads are decent. They feel good, but they need a bit more force than I like to use just to fire them. It takes a very deliberate push to get them to go, and you can't just tap them. I really hope this is something that can be updated because I find it too easy to miss a push. Hey, it's your favorite chapter to skip, but before you do that, there are a couple specs that we should note. This thing has 8 inputs, 4 mono and 2 stereo. There are a maximum for multi-track recording at 12 tracks. It has a resolution of 24-bit and 48 kilohertz, an equivalent noise of neg 143.4 dBVA weighted, which sounds absurd, but when you do the math, it comes out to about neg 130 dBUA weighted. So it's similar to the Rodecaster Pro II. The headphone outputs are 30 milliwatts, so plenty to push all kinds of headphones to all gain stages. And the big one, the preamps on this offer up to 80 dB of gain, which is just ludicrous. We'll test that in a bit. Now, this board might be overwhelming to look at first, and you get schooled in how to use it as soon as you turn it on for the first time. Very easy to follow setup right from the first screen, and it kind of walks you around the board a bit. This is also where you're introduced to the Mix Assistant. Now, if you've never set up gain staging for a mic, this is your time to use the one-button approach. And seriously, if you're completely new to this does give you the best sound just to start. Once you hit the main screen, the tour continues. Now, this is something you can redo at any time as well if you forget some things, but don't rush through this. Take your time to get to know Chungus. This will eventually pay off. Now, this main channel screen is where you get to set up the main DSP effects to use with your mics or really anything else. And this is where you run up against some gatekeeping. You see, for beginners, there's absolutely no control over the compression, EQ, gating, or really anything else. Pretty much an off and on button for when you're on easy mode. I do have some thoughts on that, but I'll keep those for the pros and cons. Switching to the enhanced mode gives you just a touch more freedom with this advanced tab up here. That said, things like gating, compression, and de-esser are still just a single on and off button. At least you can troubleshoot here if your audio is sounding like trash though. Quick pro tip, if you're in this position, the most likely candidate to be giving you that bad audio is the gate. Again, we'll get into that in a bit. Now, when you go full pro mode, there's a whole bunch more to dive into. You get a 3-band EQ, noise gate, compressor, and a de-esser. For the pros among us, the controls here will feel very easy and fluid. And this is where the board can really shine. Now, along the top, you will see different menu options. Not really much to dive into here except for the one, and that's the settings menu. Here's where you want to choose how and where you want to record and the manner that you're going to record it. Now, if you want to record a multi-track, this is the place to choose those settings. When you start it up, it will be in stereo mode, so you have to change that here. So make sure you have all these right boxes checked for all 3 options. Also, it's really cool that you can choose to record to either the USB option or the micro SD card. One quirk here though, and it's going to come up later in the pros and cons, is the firmware updating. Despite the networking link this thing has on the back, there's actually no network settings on this board, and the firmware updates have to be done by swapping either the SD card or the USB stick. And yeah, we're going to talk about that in a bit. And one last thing to note here is for your computer audio, you actually have to assign it to a fader. Now to do that, go into the channel you want to assign it to. The options are the 5.6 or the 7.8 fader. Now we're going to use fader 5.6 and choose the USB 1 and 2. This is the default output that your computer has assigned it. Then when listening to audio on your computer, just make sure that fader's up. I didn't see this step in any of the setup guide, so keep that in mind when you're starting out. So this thing has 80 dB of gain and an EIN of roughly neg 130 dBu, which in layman's terms means it should be pretty damn quiet, right? So with the SM7B plugged in, I'm going to crank this. Let's find out how noisy they actually are. Gonna get loud in a second. Now, with a test like that, you might be saying, gosh, those aren't quiet at all. But in reality, that is a boatload of gain, and with it all the way up, I'm peaking with an SM7B. That is a lot of gain. Now, when you back it off to normal levels, I've got this at 60 dB, and keep that SM7B in the normal operating range, it's actually quite silent. So impressive amounts of gain, though I do seriously question, what do you need that much gain for? Room miking with an SM7B is a really weird flex. Now, before we get to the pros and cons, let me reiterate that I will be doing a full direct comparison to the Rodecaster Pro II in a later video this week. Get subscribed so you don't miss a thing. All the comparisons will be there. But for the positives for the Chungus, or the Mackie DLZ Creator, I prefer my name for it, this thing is full beast mode. While there's a backpack option, this thing is probably never going out the door and it's going to sit on your desk full time. I mean, it is over 6 pounds. The touchscreen is really nice and it's very well implemented. I really like the Mix Assistant and the Auto Gain for beginners. It is a nice touch and not too heavy-handed. This thing has all the things going for it and really doesn't leave much off the table. And what is left off the table might be very well coming in a future update. They literally want your feedback and have already stated their willingness to grow this product into something you're going to buy. And I think that's more important than any setting on this thing. That's the one thing that all the challengers to the original Rodecaster Pro completely lacked. Constant updates and new features, or at least updates and features that mattered. This is how Rode left everyone in their dust. And Mackie's offering up a fantastic alternative option to the world. But for the cons, and there are a few, I really don't like the basic controls on this for beginners. It is a simple on-off button for the DSP effects, and well, that sucks for people that might not know what the issues are. For example, the gate on this thing is relatively aggressive in the easy mode. So let's take a look at the mixer your girlfriend told you not to worry about and find out why you should worry just a little bit. I didn't find the fader throws to be all uniform. Turn it on for the first time. So as a beginner, if you're having issues with the gate causing your words to dip out, your only option is to turn it all off, meaning you miss out on the EQ, compression, and de-esser. Now, I get it, you can just move up to the enhanced, but that doesn't really unlock much, and for me, looks closer to an easy mode than anything. Perhaps just a bit more control on the enhanced screen as well as the easy screen will fill this thing out. Next, I have to mention the hammer pads, or the touch pads, sorry. There's no nuance to them, and I hope there's a way to increase the sensitivity of them through a future update. Again, they're called touch pads. Now, next up is the lack of network options on this thing. It's pretty frustrating. I know they are teasing more network capabilities, but for now, there's absolutely no reason to plug an Ethernet cable into the back of it. Even for updating, it would be nice. Also, no word yet on if this board offers Wi-Fi support for those that don't have Ethernet capabilities. And with all that said, this is a nice segue into probably my biggest annoyance. The firmware updates through USB or SD card are complete old school and do actually come with some potential risks. Having to use swappable hardware to update can lead to unintended interruptions in the process. And for a lot of hardware, that could mean bricking it. I'm not sure if that's possible here, but for a machine that is hooked up to a computer through USB as well as with a network cable, there's no bloody reason to update this way. Make the updates through the internet connection on the board or even through the USB connection to your computer. It's just that simple. So for future wishes, first and foremost, the routing options would be a great start. This thing does have basic routing options, but nothing near to what the Rodecaster Pro II has. And that's where this thing kind of lacks immediately out of the box. But there is more. For units to truly stand apart from the competition, I think the next logical choice would be expandability in the plugins. Perhaps some upgraded plugins for EQ and compression that a user can just pay for, kind of like some of the higher priced interfaces like the Apollo series. Also, more presets for specific mics would really be awesome. Not everyone is rolling an SM7B or a Mackie mic. This is a great chance for Mackie to get creative and allow users to have stock profiles for just a bunch of mics. Now, I know this might seem counterintuitive to competition, but the most important feature of your products is how your customers can interact with it. So, should you buy the Mackie DLZ Creator? Well, I get the feeling that this is just the start for this board. There is a ton of functionality here, and the design and usability of this board is really impressive. They thought of a lot, and they delivered with an impressive display that allows more interactivity with the product. This thing is a massive upgrade from all the non-podcast mixers, and it isn't just a podcasting beast. This thing would fit in with a lot of different desks from music production to broadcast. This thing is more mixer than podcast interface, which I also think is a nice breath of fresh air. As for the price, I do think that it earns that quite easily. As long as Mackie stays committed to filling this thing out with more and more usability, the future of competition in this space is very bright. So yeah, it's pretty easy to call. It's a decent buy. This is a very viable and very competent competitor to the Rodecaster Pro II. And if you're big on size, you're going to love this thing. But then how does it compare to the Rodecaster Pro II? Well, call to action number 3. Get subscribed. That video is coming out soon, and you do not want to miss that. Cheers, and thanks for watching.